We're nearly there, ladies and gents. Bitcoin has managed to make its way up to the key resistance level at $116,800. This is the exact level that we've been watching on this channel for a little bit, and I want to break down for you what this could mean for the market. You see, the first thing that we've got to take a look at, of course, is the S&P 500, and to me, this looks like it's doing a pretty clear kind of rising channel that could break down. However, that hasn't happened yet, and Bitcoin has, as a result of this little rise up here, managed to rise up to its key resistance levels as well. So I think that's really going to be the star of the show for this video, because if Bitcoin can flip, it's actually 116.9. If Bitcoin can flip this $116,900 resistance level, that is going to be a big sign showing us that we're essentially back in this range now that Bitcoin is trading in for quite some time, by the way. You know, for the most part, Bitcoin traded here for about 20 days straight, which is definitely a reasonable period of time for this to be a significant price range now. And it also means that if this does reject Bitcoin, then yeah, we've got a pretty clear sign that we're going to have to find some lower price levels as far as support deeper in the kind of low $100,000 range. However, if we can flip this range, then that just means all of this was an extended liquidity grab, which is definitely best case scenario for bulls right now. So I think that's a really good sign. All it's going to be is, can we get above this? Can we get above this level, and then can we ideally kind of flip it and turn it into support? Now, there are a few things working against us, but they're weaker than they were before. Here's the 4-hour Ichimoku cloud. We are facing that resistance squarely right now, but it's getting weaker, right? If Bitcoin can hold this level literally just for like tomorrow, I mean, like super short period of time, Bitcoin is then going to potentially start exiting this range and actually no longer face much resistance from that Ichimoku cloud there, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And then as far as kind of, momentum indicators go, we've been looking at the daily EMA ribbon, which has actually held this entire time, which is absolutely cool. You guys saw that I lost a little bit of faith in this trend, and I still don't have complete faith in this. I'll tell you why in a moment. But the daily EMA ribbon is not a human. It doesn't have emotions. It just shows you support where support is, and it's worked out again, which is absolutely sick, which is very cool indeed. So again, I mean, from this perspective, we're potentially seeing a bigger blast off from here. Again, it's all about recovering this range. If you can recover this range, we're really back in the game. 4-hour time frame, by the way, we had a ton of EMA resistance, and we've basically broken all of it, which is fantastic, but not too surprising either, because it's easier to do that on small time frames. Now, if we do end up kind of reclaiming this range and just kind of trading here a little bit, that's going to be, a pretty decent outcome. If we can even just do that for a couple of days, that's fine, because eventually I would expect some sort of test to the upside. It might originally look like a deviation, come back down, but then eventually I think for sure we're going to be able to get above, because like I said, man, if we could get above that $116,900 resistance level, I don't really think that anything else can be a particularly serious issue for Bitcoin at that stage. I think that Bitcoin will have kind of conquered its key resistance levels that it needs to worry about, so I think that's really cool. As far as Bitcoin dominance goes, it's dropped back down into this range right here. It's not swept any lows, but it certainly looks like it wants to. Ethereum against Bitcoin is looking very strong. It's set a brand new high, but very local high, but still a brand new high. So if it can hold on to this range, then again, I still think we're looking at pumping up, or if it wants to pump up right now, I mean, that would also make sense given where Bitcoin is right now. However, let's slow it down for a second, because the S&P 500, it's had a correction here, and we've covered this already. See, this correction right here took the S&P down by about 3.3% from its high. This one's also about 3.3% from its high, and crucially, this drop resulted in a break of the all-time high. Okay, this yellow line represents the all-time high that we set in February of 2025, and it sent the S&P 500 up by about 11.6% from there. So definitely was enough for the market to continue rallying up. And let's be clear, this happened after an already quite explosive rally, right? I mean, like, there was a pretty, I mean, this is the low that Trump called that everybody was losing their minds about. Obviously we weren't, because on this YouTube channel we keep it grounded and realistic, and so we kind of saw this coming, that there would need to be some sort of a correction. We already had one little correction right here. This was a pretty sizable correction at 6.3 for the S&P 500, and a little 2% here. So I mean, we don't need heavy corrections, and that's a point that we made in every single video leading up to where we are right now. That 3.3% can definitely be enough for the S&P 500. However, we are still very close to the previous all-time high, and we are forming some sort of a kind of ascending parallel channel, which, it is a very typical continuation pattern inside of a downtrend. That doesn't mean that we have to trend down now, but that's definitely what this pattern is. And it's worked successfully to serve this particular purpose, in the past many times. I mean, another super easy example of this, fairly similar circumstances is this one right here, right? I mean, essentially all you're seeing is, market kind of trends down a little bit, fights that trend a little bit, and then it just absolutely drops the ball. Is that going to happen? I don't know. Tariffs don't seem to have shaken the markets, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, apparently Putin is meeting with Trump. So, these things are arguably quite bullish for the market. So we've got to see how the next week goes along. But of course, it's so unpredictable with Trump being president. And that is brilliant. I absolutely love it. That makes the markets a lot more engaging to trade in. And that also means that we stand to make a lot more money. So yeah, it's a little bit annoying. Yeah, it would have been a lot easier if it was, a drunk female like Kamala. But at the end of the day, we do still have something that we can work with, and it's actually very juicy. It's, all you need is a little bit more, you basically just got to grab your balls, make sure they're there, and then you're basically ready to keep going. So I think that's really important. And, the reason I say that anything to do with the S&P 500 is important, we cover this a lot, especially, if you're not new to the channel, you're going to be very familiar with these ideas now. But essentially, the S&P 500 is being moved by the same money that moves Bitcoin these days. So, it's essentially more of a primary source, so to speak, to see where investor appetite is. And, again, it's not bad right now. If anything, it's kind of neutral, but it's neutral inside of an aggressive uptrend. So that's not neutral, that's still bullish. So, I think that's really looking good. And then again, how does that translate for Bitcoin? Well, we're consolidating under resistance right now, which is, one of the best things you could do. So if we just hold this level for a little bit, it's already tested the downside. It hasn't quite tested the upside. If it can test the upside without getting a horrible rejection, then this can potentially, like I said, turn into support, and then we're on, you know what I mean? Like, then it's game on. Things could get very, very explosive from there. Ethereum's kind of doing something similar with this range right here. I want to show this to you really quickly. On Ethereum, if we take a look at this with a kind of, rectangular box, we can definitely see that this was a, an interesting kind of zone of resistance for Ethereum going back just toward the end of July. If we zoom out and look at this on the daily, this has been an important range going back throughout Ethereum's history just for this year as well. And so if Ethereum can, kind of conclusively break above this range, then we're definitely looking at a situation where you can start to get, some kind of back test like that, and then really start rocketing up into that $4,000 price range for Ethereum, which also puts Ethereum, on track to set a new all-time high as well, because I believe its all-time high was about 4,800, something like that. So that's also going to be within reach if Ethereum can start flipping those resistance levels. So that's absolutely fantastic. Is this going to happen? Look, it's resistance, and resistance is where, typically you actually want to go short, because believe it or not, resistance is where rejections tend to happen. So, I don't want to say that I'm too certain about any of this, because I'm not. I wasn't even too certain about the idea that the market might drop further. I still feel like I said, that's a possibility given where the S&P 500 is, but it's definitely weaker now. I think definitely the bulls are in a better stance right now. So we've just got to see how this plays out. The main thing is this resistance level for Bitcoin. This Ethereum chart that I just showed you, or any other charts on altcoins, none of that shit matters if Bitcoin can't break above this resistance level. And like I said, if it can't, then, just like the S&P 500, Bitcoin is in a pretty clear kind of, downward trend with a pretty clear continuation pattern. It would be highly, surprising for me if, Bitcoin somehow loses its ground here. Let's say it drops below 115. It would be very surprising for me if we don't sweep this low. At that stage, if we drop below like 115K, I would definitely expect that Bitcoin is kind of looking to sweep its previous low at 112K. And again, where does that put it? 107, 109, whatever. Everybody has their own price targets. My favorite price target is going to be about $107,000. But again, different people have different opinions on that. So, your analysis is probably going to tell you something a little bit different. But in any case, I do think that it would be a bad sign for the market. And again, if we can recover back above this range, then again, I just don't think that this resistance level is going to be too heavy for Bitcoin to break this 120K range, right? I feel like if we can get above this one here, then we've done the hard part, and I don't think that 120 is going to be too hard to penetrate, especially after getting this massive deep liquidity grab, and especially considering this liquidity grab will have, at this point, stretched out for essentially like a week or so. That's going to be a really strong indication that the market has picked its side. And if the market has picked its side, I don't really think that sellers are going to be standing in between, and trying to slow that down, especially at this stage when Bitcoin is still kind of actively in essentially like some sort of price discovery, right? I mean, the only time Bitcoin has ever traded in this price range between 112 and 117K is right here during the 7-day period that we're still in. We had a tiny bit over here. We had, a tiny bit with these wicks, but this is the only time Bitcoin in its ever in its entire history has traded in these ranges. So we're still kind of carrying out price discovery here, which is absolutely fantastic, because if we can prove to the bulls and to the bears that bulls are in charge, basically, that's probably gonna weigh things really well in the favor of bulls in this market. So this is gonna be something that we keep on watching out for. Obviously, Bitcoin dominance is gonna be one of the key stars of the show, because if Bitcoin dominance does keep on dropping, if it does basically form its own, because it is kind of doing something like this now, like some sort of a kind of continuation pattern to the downside, then we probably are looking at some level of real alt season at this stage, if it can get a drop down here moving forward. Is it going to be the real alt season? I still don't think so. I think the real alt season is going to be pretty fucking crazy. It's going to melt faces. It's going to be a pretty insane thing, and I don't really think that we're there yet. I don't think that the S&P 500's there yet. I don't think anything has reached those kind of levels yet. But shit, I could be wrong about it. You know what I mean? Like, this is a good sign if we just kind of look at how the Bitcoin dominance has dropped in the past. It's done somewhat similar stuff to this. You start with a really high level. In this case, it was 73. In our case, it was about 66. And then, you come down and you just kind of find a little bit of, support. You just muck about, for a little bit. I mean, this ended up lasting for about, 60 days, 2 months. And, what we're seeing right now, much shorter time frame than that. So far, we're only at about 3 weeks. But, we have seen somewhat similar things happen when Bitcoin did end up losing some of its dominance here. So we'll just have to wait and see how this continues to play out. So far, I still think it's too early. I still think that altcoin holders are not really showing me signs of this being time yet. I'm seeing too much exuberance too quickly, and then that exuberance goes really quickly as well. So it's just a bunch of emotional traders still dominating the market. And do emotional traders make money like that? I mean, yeah, they will eventually if they wait, but it's usually not a particularly happy ending for them. So I don't know. I'm not holding my breath for any particular direction right now. I think we're still waiting to see a little bit of confirmation. I think we'll get that confirmation if Bitcoin can get above that 117k level, or if it can get below 112. We're on the edge of getting above 117 right now, so let's see if this happens. If it does happen, it would be absolutely fantastic. And again, eyes on the S&P 500. We got to see what happens. Like I said, it's a little bit more of a political discussion, but I think it's definitely still going to be important to look at. And if the S&P 500 does end up setting a brand new all-time high, then we're basically probably done with the correction at that stage, and we might have to expect it to rally up toward 6,700, 6,600, whatever, before we can start talking about another pullback. And that would probably result in also 124k Bitcoin, something like that. So that would be really nice to see. So we'll have to wait and see how all that plays out. Obviously, lots of really exciting stuff, lots of highly tradable events kind of starting to take shape in this market now. Obviously, traditional finance also looking really nice. You guys know me, I love looking at Tesla stock and stuff like that, and you can actually trade Tesla stock with this top link in the description right here for Bybit. There's going to be a link that you guys can use to trade traditional finance as well as crypto using your crypto holdings as well. So really cool. You get a huge deposit bonus when you do start trading on Bybit. It's one of the best exchanges in the game. They've been around for one of the longest periods of time. Great. They're battle tested. I mean, that's the bottom line. 𝗙𝗟𝗋, very familiar in many ways, but obviously a lot newer. What's really cool about 𝗙𝗟𝗋 is that the team has been posting chart setup updates in there exclusively for people that have signed up to 𝗙𝗟𝗋 using this link down below. So check all those things out if you're interested, and if you're not from a restricted region. Otherwise, or if not, if that's you, if it's not you, whatever, smash up those likes, double check that you're subscribed, tick the bell, all that good stuff, and we will see you all in the next video. Cheers.